Hey, what's up YouTube? Cold Water from Phantom Trading here, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you guys how to take counter trend trades. In this case, this is a US100 trade recap for a trade that I took yesterday that was completely counter trend. Everything was bullish. I took a short. I'm going to show you guys kind of the logic behind it and why I did it. Of course, if you're new to trading, I don't suggest that you go around trying to just take counter trend trades. Learn how to trade with the trend first, but obviously this is a nice tool to have, ability to be able to trade against the trend, playing pullbacks and stuff. But yeah, let's dive into it. Start with the weekly here. We've obviously tapped into this demand level. We were respecting it. We've got an internal structure break here, which is obviously, because we're on the weekly, that internal structure break is a clear break of structure on the daily, as I'll show you guys in a second. As we drop down to that time frame, right, you can see that we're also respecting this sort of nested level of daily demand here, right? So we respect that, and we can see that we're also in this daily level of supply that we're starting to potentially respect, right? So I've already cut price back to the previous day, so I can show you guys bar replay how I entered my short. But essentially, we're pretty bearish here. I'll quickly mark out daily structure. It's kind of as follows. It is this high, right? This low, lower high. Lower high gets confirmed as we break this previous low, right? And then we kind of whipsaw and we shift from bearish to bullish. It's not really a whipsaw, but more so we're just shifting structure from bearish to bullish. As you can see here. So we're bullish on the daily, but in a daily demand zone, right? Looks like we swept something a little bit here. I'm just going to change the color of this so it's a little easier for you guys to see, right? You can see we kind of swept there. I'll zoom into it, right? And our daily, yeah, is bullish. Again, we're reacting off of demand from here, but also we're in the supply zone. So we could potentially see this supply get seeked as liquidity, right? Because we do have a bit of a stack of liquidity here. Really, you'd be thinking there are stop limit buy orders and stop losses from sellers that sold from this previously that are probably pulled up, above this kind of level here, right? So based on that, we'll go down to the 4 hour. You can see our 4 hour is also pretty bullish. I'll quickly mark out our structure and then some of our zones here. But essentially, my 4 hour would look a little something like this, right? We have a high. We then break this low, right? We get a pretty significant pullback here. We don't really break internal structure on this one, but it's enough of a pullback that I'd count it as swing structure, right? We then push lower, right? I wouldn't count this as a break, but I would count this breakdown as a break, at which point I'm going to look between my previous lower low here and I'm going to look for essentially the highest point before that break, right? In this case, I would put my high here. Of course, I'm kind of trailing it or moving it over here and moving this and kind of considering this a structure point, not because it broke this, but just because it swept the previous high and then broke below, right, with conviction. So, because somebody was asking me a question about that yesterday, I figured I'd kind of mention that. It's a small nuance thing that you can kind of do with structure as well. Again, we're not viewing this as a break, but rather a trailed high, right? Just because it did make technically a kind of a higher high here, right, compared to the previous high, but it's not a structure break, right? It's a swing point, but it's not a structure break. Anyways, this is our new structure range on the 4 hour. It's kind of as such, right? At which point we break up, right? We start to pull back. Do we call this a break? No, this is actually the same kind of scenario here as well. Look, we're just sweeping again, right? Yeah, we did close above it, but not with a ton of conviction, right? So I'm not going to count that as a break. If anything, it's a sort of floating high here, right? And I'm just going to move it because, again, we didn't count that as a break until we then break this low, right? We then get a pretty significant pullback where we're breaking substructure, and we can call this a high, low, lower high, lower low. And then we shift again to bullish, right? Here, you can see that price shoots up. We don't trail this because, again, we're going from a lower low to a higher high. So this is our new structure range, right? So we're now expecting either this high or this low to go. Obviously the high goes, right? We break above here. We looks like we close above here, but again, I'm not going to count these like 4 candles as a pullback. Of course, I'm going to keep on floating the high until we get a significant pullback. In terms of my higher low though, right, what's the lowest point after my previous higher high in this bullish trend, or sorry, bullish market? Well, it would be this low here, right, because it happens after. And yeah, basically our major structure points or structure ranges are kind of like so, right? And here's our new one, right? So we're continuing to make higher highs, higher lows. We get a pullback, we continue to push up. Again, I wouldn't count any of these as pullbacks because they're fading up, and they're really wicky as well. So to me, my 4-hour structure range is as such. This is my swing point low, right? Again, because it's the lowest point that we're confirming as a higher low before we break, as we break this previous higher high, right? And again, it's because it's after the higher high that breaks. We're counting this kind of as our higher low. It's the lowest point before the break, right? So based on that, we have kind of this 4-hour. It's kind of hard to mark this out, to be honest, but I've kind of marked out these wicks. You could have also marked out kind of these candles, but they don't get tapped into. I'm just kind of marking this out because there is an imbalance kind of left over here as well. So call this the 4-hour. The other way that I've marked this up just today, because we didn't really tap into this point yet, right? These 2 4-hour candles up here, because I kind of just marked them as like nested 4-hour zones that are nested within each other, right? So we can see obviously 4-hour order flow and 4-hour structure as well as daily is bullish. They're all bullish swing structure so far. Of course, because our order flow on the 4-hour is bullish, that means our 15-minute is bullish too, right? I covered this in the 2 structure training videos, right? What is order flow on a higher time frame is going to be swing structured most of the time, 90% of the time, on the lower relative time frame to the time frame that you're on, right? So let's quickly mark out our 15-minute swing structure and show you guys kind of how that looks. So we have our low here. We've obviously pushed up quite aggressively. We pull back, right? So we're making higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, right? Very clear trend here, right? And the reason I'm starting so far back here is, again, so we don't get caught in a complex pullback. But we then close pretty well below this, at which point we start to whipsaw quite a bit, right? We're taking out highs and then lows. Price is essentially expanding, right? We then break above here, at which point I would call this my new high. Again, we're not going to trail this because we're shifting from a lower low to a higher high, right? So this is our new structure leg or range, right? Again, price could have conceivably or potentially pulled back to any one of these points and then pushed up, right? Obviously it pulled back a bit, right? At which point I would call this my higher low that is confirmed as we break above here, right? So my new structure range is like this. And this is where, again, we get very consolidative 15-minute price action. It's very corrective, and it's obviously consolidating. One thing I wanted to mention is, part of the reason I don't like using the concept of premium and discount is because you have scenarios like this where price is not going to come back to the 50%. If there's enough momentum behind it, it's just going to keep going, right? It'll pull back and then continue to push up. Now, in this case, right, 15-minute, it's not super reliable, right? Again, it's kind of whipsawing all over the place. In some of these cases, obviously, price pulls back to discount before breaking up, right? This one doesn't actually even make it either, right? It's not always going to do it. It really depends on the type of market that you're in, right? So I don't think it's like the greatest tool to use. It is a tool that obviously you can use in ranges. That's where I'll use it, premium and discount. But other than that, I don't really use it for structure. It's just, again, it's not reliable, right? It works in certain market conditions. So anyways, based on that, right, we're starting to see that whipsawing price action, but we're taking out our low with a lower low, and then our lower low is then creating a higher high, and then our higher high is then creating another lower low, right? Now in this case, I'm going to count this one as our structure range. We obviously close below it. I'm going to count this as a pullback, right? It looks like it's like 4 or 5 candles. It's a pretty deep pullback relative to the previous structure range, right? And then obviously we break below, and then again we break above here, right? So at this point I'm going to kind of view this as a floating 15-minute high, but we're essentially bullish on it, right? So it's this low and this high, and again we could potentially pull back to any one of these zones. Now you're going to see that price kind of within 1 to 2 candles, 3 candles goes down and up. I'm not going to count this as structure either, and I'm going to explain why. Number one, it's not much of a pause in price action, right? It's really just price being manipulated at the open, right? This is 9:30 open. It's the US100 stock market open in New York, right? The US stock market open. So I'm not going to view it as structure, right? If it were, 5 candles, sure, because it did pull back quite significantly before breaking up. But otherwise, I'm just going to view that as substructure, and I'm just going to float this high, meaning that until I get a significant pullback that is, corrective, maybe we're breaking internal structure. Until that happens, I'm not going to view it as a potential higher low before breaking into a higher high, right? So anyways, based on that, I'm still expecting that price is going to do some sort of, or make some sort of correction before, pushing up higher. That's kind of my expectation based on, this bullish structure. So that's part of the reason I'm going to look for shorts here in a second, right? And obviously it's counter trend to every time frame, right? And even order flow, as you'll see in a second, right? We're taking out these highs, right? There's a lot of liquidity that is pooled above these highs here, as well as obviously below, which I'm going to cover in a second. Right? We have liquidity that's kind of sitting here that we're going to target later. So I'll cover that in a second, but essentially you're going to see that price is going to continue to push up. It's going to come into our 4-hour zone a little bit, and then we can kind of start looking for potential shorts here. Now, obviously, we close above this previous structure point, but this is not our last structure point. So again, I'm not viewing this really as, obviously we broke structure at this point, right? So again, we are bullish based on that, but our range is still kind of developing itself, right? We haven't pulled back enough to, again, develop that higher low. So based on that, right, I'm still viewing this obviously as more so a sweep, just based on, the overall volatility of the market, right? As much as it closed above it, it didn't really close above it with a ton of conviction, right? So I'm not really talking so much about structure here, but more so, am I viewing this as a bull trap, right? Is price being manipulated in a way that is tricking people into thinking that price is going to shoot up higher from an intraday perspective? I think so, right? So based on that, right, even though we are counter trend, I'm going to look for shorts here. That's really my reasoning behind it. I think that price is getting manipulated. I think it's going to go in the opposite direction. They're tricking people who are both breakout traders who are expecting, this to shoot up higher. Maybe they have stop limit buy orders here. And plus, they're also sweeping people who are in shorts from, these levels, right? So they're taking liquidity, and obviously, once price is manipulated, we can expect that it's going to shoot in the opposite direction of the trap, the bull trap in this sense, right? So this is, one of the few ways that you can trade counter trend. And again, obviously, based on our whole impulse and correction theory here, I'm expecting that price is going to pull back before it shoots up higher. Of course, I expect that this high is weak, and we're going to continue to, pull up higher, right? But if we look at the 4-hour as well, to give it some context, you're pretty high in this 4-hour leg. We could see a deeper correction into one of these levels of demand as well. Yeah. So let's go back to the 1 minute and kind of analyze what's happening here, right? So it's not really a POI that we're playing off of per se. You can look at it as, okay, we've tapped into this 4-hour, and I think we may have even tapped into a refined zone, but I didn't even mark that out, right? Oh, sorry, we'll go back on the 15-minute. It's just too far back. I think we tapped into something here anyways, right? It's kind of a 15-minute range. So you could mark this out if you really wanted to. We did tap into it. But again, I'm viewing this kind of sweep of this high as my POI in a sense, right? Because again, maybe you would have wanted to short off of that. So the fact that that got taken out is kind of nice, right? Tells me that, again, price is being manipulated. So you can see here we're taking out this high. We have this minor level of demand here, as well as this sort of level here, right? We can go from wick to this low here for our demand, right? And then, of course, we have this demand level here as well. I'm just going to move this over for a second so it's not so crowded. Let me zoom into this so that I can kind of explain my thought process behind it, right? So obviously, price has shot up. It was making higher highs and higher lows on the 1 minute, creating 1 minute order flow. We then get a shift in order flow where we're starting to violate demand. Supply is starting to hold, right? So if you really wanted to, you could play a super aggressive short off of this extreme level here. The problem with it, of course, is you don't have much of a shift in order flow really showing itself yet, right? So I wouldn't personally take this unless you are super confident in this shooting lower. I wouldn't really look to play this, right? This is like really an advanced way to play the market. I'm not sure if anybody in the Phantom trading community took this. I think one person did, just in our indices chat. I was kind of looking at it yesterday. I think it might have been Murph. So Murph, if you caught that, nice work. Regardless, I mean, you would have got break even pretty quick. I personally wouldn't have taken it. What I was looking to play was not even this one either. I actually missed this next one, right? You can see we now have 2 levels of demand failing. Supply is starting to form a chain, starting to hold. Price comes, it taps back into this larger overall candle here, right? I wanted to short this. Again, I missed it. And I was like, okay, you know what? It's starting to chain. I'm expecting that price is probably going to, respect this next level here too, right? So what I did was I actually entered market on this a little bit higher up as it was coming up, but obviously we're starting to see multiple levels of demand fill. We see this level of demand fill as well, right? I'll just drag it over and maybe define it as this wick so it's a little cleaner. You can see we now have 4 levels of demand failing, a supply chain forming, supply being respected, and so now I'm looking to play this, right? So see that price will start to come back up, right? And again, remember, we're trading counter trend here, so really the way that we want to play this is we want to be pretty aggressive in the way that we manage the trade. So we're going to look to take partials pretty early. There we go, we're tapped into the trade, kind of hovers around for a little bit, then of course we hit our break-even point. This is the low that tapped me into my position, right? So the minute we hit this, I am break-even on the trade. I'm trailing my stop loss to this level here, right? And with certain prop firms, they don't even charge commissions on the indices, so it's pretty nice, right? I don't have to cover commissions by trailing my stop loss a little bit, right? So my stop loss kind of looks like this, right? So if we just kind of break down what happened as well, right? I want to quickly mention, so here's our 930 open, right? You can see obviously price manipulated even people into thinking that it was going to go short kind of from here, right? It was kind of pushing down earlier in pre-market, and then obviously it swept anybody that was maybe short from pre-market out. It also tricked people into thinking that price was going to push up higher, because look, we got this extremely bullish impulsive leg, right, with 930 open. Again, it's manipulation, right? So when I see that and then I see price start to fade out, right, sweeping highs and stuff, again, this is all stuff that kind of stacks into a bunch of confluences for me to justify looking for a counter trend short in an extremely bullish market, right? Daily 4 hour and 15-minute as well as 15-minute order flow are all bullish, right? So I'm really just playing 1 minute order flow here and the sweep, right? So obviously we're break even on this, right? And in terms of management, we can now look at the 15-minute. The first place I was looking to take partials was right around this point, right? I think my stop loss is a little bit smaller because I remember this being around 7.5 hour. I don't have the exact numbers on here, but I basically looked to take, I think like 50% off at this point, and then I kind of let the rest run and took partials as it ranged, as you're going to see in a bit. So I'll go on the 1 minute and let this play through so you guys can see how it developed, right? So you can see it kind of pushed around, and eventually it started gaining a little bit more momentum, right? I started taking partials at this point, and then you'll see it started to range here. Now, because we're so counter trend, I was not expecting that price, was going to take this low out. And I'm not even sure it does until today. Like maybe today it did. I can't remember. But anyways, I saw a lot of liquidity that was kind of stacked up here to target as well, right? Trendline liquidity that we can expect. Retail traders are probably looking to long off of potentially, right? As it's forming this sort of, level that you maybe could have longed off of. They got taken out, right? And then price obviously continued to push lower as their stop losses got taken out. It adds to selling pressure in the market, right? So we see that price continues to push down. This ends up peaking out at around like 11 or 12 R, I believe, right? It takes these lows out as well, as I'll show you guys in a second. But I look to, start to continue to partial out at different amounts. I think I was taking like 30% off of, the remaining amount of my position until I decided to just get out completely. I believe I netted around 9.5 R on this trade, right? Something like that. That's what my calculation was for it anyways. But yeah, you can kind of see that price continues to shoot down lower, right? It could have obviously held it a little bit longer, but then of course it started to pull back, right? So that's pretty much how you can trade counter trend. Again, I don't suggest doing this if you're new to trading this way or trading in general. Try to trade with the trend, but obviously, once you've mastered those skills, this is a great skill to add to your arsenal of tools or, you know, ways of approaching the market, so you can, you know, pretty much capture more of the moves in the market, right? So I want to thank you guys again for watching this video, and I hope you guys learned something new from it. It looks like we actually peaked out at 13R here, right? So, you know, really you could have like had a target here at this 15-minute level of demand. But anyways, thanks again for watching, guys. I will catch you on the next video.